ultimately, I do think that a conciliatory position from Russia would be a better way of ending this conflict than one in which things just freeze as they are now.
You know, it was the neocons' hope that if you overthrew Saddam Hussein, democracy would sweep the region. And, you know, that would have been nice, I guess. But, you know, the hope that, oh, if they strike inside of Russia, that will make Russia realize that, you know, this war just has cost us a little bit too much and we sure should knock off this war business. It's quite a risky game to play. There's a couple of things that I want to. Well, let me just respond to a couple things you said there, because things that I think are pretty interesting. So, number one. Just a couple points of correction. I mean, I know I said it was a good point in jest, but
woke streamer Vaush absolutely lost his mind after Dave Smith embarrassed him on live TV. It's not often that we get to see Vaush debate people like Dave Smith or anyone on the right wing who is a prominent figure, because number one, people on the left just don't debate people on the right because they know they're going to lose. That's why they try to censor the right wing, and the right wing doesn't try to censor them on social media, because they know that if they have to compete in the marketplace of ideas, they're going to lose every single time. And, you know, it's very obvious. You can just go look and see which side is winning and which side has the losing argument just by checking who is censoring the other side and who isn't. And the left wing is the side that censors the others, and the left wing is the ones who want to exist in their echo chamber and never speak to the other side. But also because Vaush has done some really, really weird things in the past. So it's understandable that these people wouldn't want to sit down with him and speak to him. Very understandable. In fact, let's get into this clip though, where Dave Smith absolutely demolishes Vaush on multiple different topics, basically shatters his entire worldview, but mainly when it comes to, you know, NATO, Ukraine, and just the foreign things that are happening, the foreign wars that are happening as a result of the Biden administration. And he absolutely schools Vaush on all of these different topics. Let's get into this Dave Smith versus Vaush debate.
A more fortified Russian military, while the previous one failed. In other words, like, what is this Hail Mary that you're talking about that could change the calculation on the ground to such an extent that it's worth it to continue throwing Ukrainian men and women into the maw of this war?
Well, I don't like the term throwing, only because, like, they are, of course, you know, engaged in it, right? They're not just being
no, they're being grabbed in many cases and literally thrown.
45-year-old men.
Well, literally thrown. Yes. Ukrainian morale, or at least interest in continuing the war, is still high, but that sort of
By the way, I don't know if you guys feel like this. Maybe I'm just kind of an asshole, but I hate the way Vaush speaks. He tries so hard to speak like he's super intelligent, and it just doesn't work. Like, who's getting fooled by this? Like, just the way that I'm not even saying that he's trying to use big words or anything. He does do that too, but it's just the way he carries himself. It's kind of like the exact definition of someone trying to sound and act smart. Like, it's a perfect example of that. Just listen closely to the way he speaks, not even the words that he uses, like I said, just the way he speaks. He's trying so hard to come across as smart.
Pick a side. I would only say, look, the Hail Mary is something that I hope for. It's not something that I think is guaranteed. With the introduction of ATACMS and other relatively long-range, munitions, we have the ability to sort of provide Ukraine the option to strike at depots, refineries, and facilities that are closer to the sort of back lines of the conflict. And that has had like a massive effect in the past 4 or 5 months since that was introduced. I don't know whether that's going to be a game changer in the war in the long run. I hope that it is, because ultimately I do think that a conciliatory position from Russia would be a better way of ending this conflict than one in which things just freeze as they are now. The DMZ buildup along the line that people settled on right now would be catastrophic, and I think it would just guarantee further war. My hope, and this is, I know, perhaps a little naive of me, but I still have a little bit in me that hopes for this. My hope is that eventually, following the expansion of Ukraine's ability to strike at further back targets, this becomes increasingly economically untenable for Russia. There's pressure from both sides. Hey, this has gone on long enough. We literally can't keep this going anymore. We're both on fumes. And like two exhausted boxers on the 14th round, they both collapse into each other's arms. And, they have a Christmas Day in World War I. There's a moment where for a second, things get rough enough, long enough that they collapse and they just can't do it anymore. And maybe the world breathes a sigh of peace as they finally do settle on whatever line they're at that point.
It's quite a day.
It's hilarious. And Dave Smith's about to go in on Vaush here in a second, but it's hilarious. I don't think Vaush is some really smart person, really intelligent person. I don't think I am either. So I don't think it's that difficult to understand that we have been brainwashed extensively throughout the school system, throughout our media, about what Russia really is and what they're about and what Putin really is and what he's about. They make him out to seem like, and look, I'm not the biggest fan of Putin. I don't think he's a great world leader. I don't think he's some person that's after world peace or anything like that. He's very obviously about conquering other nations, about conquering land that he feels like is owed to him. And it's not in our best interest for him to be doing that. There's no doubt about it. But they make him out to seem like he's literally Thanos or something, just going around and trying to just decimate these countries just for the fun of it. He's just laughing at it. Like, no, Putin is in a position where he has to accomplish these things or else he's going to be killed. If he doesn't accomplish these things, like he'll literally be taken out so that somebody who can't accomplish these things is in a position of power. Like that's how Russia works. And I'm not saying that they're the good guys or anything, but the way that Vaush talks about them, he talks about them as if they are, the empire and Putin is just Darth Vader or Emperor Palpatine leading the empire. It's like, it's really not that simple to where they're just the bad guys and we're just the good guys. It's really not that simple, but they act like it is. And I know Vaush is not stupid enough to think that it really is that simple. Like I was saying earlier, I don't think he's a genius or anything, but it doesn't take a genius to realize that we have been 100% brainwashed throughout the school system and throughout the mainstream media. And we see that from the interviews that people like Tucker Carlson, luckily, are brave enough to go and do over in Russia, even though the FBI tried to stop him and everything like that. He went over there and talked to Putin. And we can see that through stuff like that happening, which, why do you think they tried to stop him, by the way? Because they don't want you to realize that you have been brainwashed your entire life. They want you to just continue to think the same exact things that you've always thought about Russia and about Putin. But luckily we have people like Tucker Carlson who are willing to do that. And now Dave Smith is about to go in on Vaush and hopefully he says some of the same things and hopefully he says it a lot better than I could say it to Vaush's face. Let's see the meltdown here from Vaush after Dave Smith annihilates him.
Dangerous game to play, man. I mean, I know it was the
it's
neocons.
All dangerous, right?
Well, sure, but I'm just saying, it was the neocons' hope that if you overthrew Saddam Hussein, democracy would sweep the region, and that would have been nice, I guess. But the hope that if they strike inside of Russia, that will make Russia realize that this war just has cost us a little bit too much, and we sure should knock off this war business. It's quite a risky game to play. There's a couple of things that I want to. Well, let me just respond to a couple things you said there because things that I think are pretty interesting. So, number one. Just a couple points of correction. I mean, I know I said it was a good point in jest, but no, it's not true that every dollar that goes to Ukraine is a dollar that doesn't go to Israel. I mean, as you know, we print money out of thin air, and the U.S. government is quite fine to spend well beyond its means. So no, they can deficit finance through fiat currency both of these wars at the same time. Now, what that's going to do to our dollar?
Equipment too, not just money.
Sure. Yeah, no, mostly we're just bribing the military-industrial complex and sending old weapons over there. However, there is, as you brought up the talk of agency before, it is true that individuals have agency. It's also true that there's such a thing as moral hazard. So if I were to just say, I'll start giving, hey, Ryan, I'm going to start giving you $1 million a month. And then you quit your job and you sit at home and I go, look, he doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to work. He wants to stay home. He doesn't want to do it. It's like, well, yeah, okay, there is some truth to that, but might that have, the Ukrainians just want to fight. Okay, but might that have something to do with the blank check that they've received from the world? So the whole point here, right, is that, and this is true with Israel and with Ukraine, what happens is that when the biggest bully in the history of the world, the U.S. empire, says, we got your back, people get a lot braver than they otherwise would. If Israel didn't have unconditional support from the United States of America, they'd be forced to make a deal with some of their neighbors. And same with Ukraine. You say like, if the war ended, Ukraine would just be ready to fight Russia again in a few years without our backing, without us arming them, without all of Europe behind them. No, they wouldn't, because they know it's a fight they couldn't possibly win.
Dave, what's a riskier game to play? I mean, I think I know what your answer would be to this, but what's a riskier game to play? Is it allowing Putin to expand unchecked, just to go back to the argument that Vaush made earlier, or is it, escalating the war? It seems as though there are risks in both scenarios, and why is one riskier than the other at this point?
The thing is, it doesn't have to be one or the other. People are acting like as if it has to be one or the other. I don't think, I'm probably going to come across as some like Putin fanboy or something like that. I'm not at all. It's just that these people have been so brainwashed about who Putin is and who Russia is. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think we could come to an agreement with Putin, and we should at least try it. Maybe I'm being super naive, and maybe we make an agreement with Putin and he just goes back on the agreement. So let's say, hey, Putin, we'll grant you this part of Ukraine. You can have this part, the part that you feel like is a birthright to you and Russia. You can have this part, but you have to stop after that. That is the agreement. And if he agrees to it, let's take the agreement. If he continues after that, then we have a full right to retaliate. We have a full right to put him back in his place, but we'll never know unless we actually try. Like how I know a lot of you are going to be in the comments saying, yeah, Putin's never going to stop though. That if we give him land, then we're just giving him a free W. I mean, we're not making him use resources and money and manpower to get that land. It's like, yes, but if he wasn't going to stop with our agreement, then he was never going to stop anyway. So we might as well attempt to come to an agreement where there's a chance, a possibility that he will stop. And we can stop the bloodshed. We can stop sending American tax dollars overseas to these wars that have nothing to do with us. We might as well try it, right? That's my stance on the whole thing. Let's see what Dave Smith has to say.
At this point.
Well, look, I mean, okay. So the biggest risk that, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we should all be concerned about is the potential of nuclear war. And what's prevented the nuclear war in the past has been private negotiations, handshake agreements, and mutually assured destruction. The fact that, nobody really wants to get into a nuclear exchange because we all lose. The only time, especially now, because the current administration isn't doing handshake deals or even having conversations behind the scenes with the Russians, the only thing that could lead to a nuclear exchange. So in other words, the worst case scenario is that Vladimir Putin actually thinks he's going to die. He thinks he's going to end up like Muammar Gaddafi. And that's the scenario where you might end up launching nukes because, screw it, bring everybody down with you. In terms of the risk of Russian expansion, I do think that Vaush made a somewhat fair point where, look, between the mix of, this is my point, not yours, but resulting in yours, between the mix of NATO joint military exercises with the Ukrainian government, the massive amounts of foreign aid, the weapons shipments that Ukraine has got, going back to before the invasion of 2022, but certainly since 2022, it has made Ukraine a tougher adversary than they otherwise would have been. Vladimir Putin famously said back in 2008, when he was warning Burns, who was the ambassador to Russia at the time, that I could be in Kiev in 2 weeks. Well, I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's a tougher battle for him than that. But then also, you think because he ends up getting the eastern part of Ukraine, that he's moving on Poland after that? I just think there's absolutely no reason to think that that's the situation. I don't think the bottom line is that
he's right next to Poland, it seems like, given the history of NATO and everything else, that's pretty dangerous too.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the whole argument that all of the people who wanted to bring Ukraine into NATO made was that, well, he won't attack them if they're a NATO country. Now he's going to go after Poland. I just don't see it as being very likely. I don't think the guy's on a suicide mission. I think, as Burns told Condoleezza Rice, that it was never a suicide mission. It was a choice they didn't want to have to make. That's what our intelligence was saying at the time. And so, no, I don't think that there is to pretend. Look, I think American expansionism has been more of a threat to the American Republic than anything else. The idea that Putin is somehow some type of existential threat to America, I think, is, aside from the nuclear question, just not true. I think that
it's based. And this is why I love Dave Smith so much. He's not a right winger. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's distanced himself from the right wing over and over again. He calls out the neocons constantly, and he's also not brainwashed like everybody else is. And he's willing to call out things that a lot of other people aren't willing to call out, like the funding of not just Ukraine, but also what's happening over in the Middle East with Ben Shapiro's favorite country that I can't even say the word because you're not allowed to criticize them at all. He calls them out too, but he doesn't do it from like a place of hatred or bias. He's just calling out the facts, and people like Vaush, they can't stand to listen. Notice how Vaush has been absolutely silent throughout this entire thing because Dave Smith has the facts on his side. And what are you going to argue when you're arguing against someone who has the facts on their side? There's nothing to really say from Vaush here. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about Dave Smith absolutely destroying Vaush here on live television in this debate. If you enjoy content like this, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.